Call Budget Committee to order at 6:30 p.m. This is a regular meeting of the Budget Committee for the month of October. The agenda was posted more than 24 hours in advance as required. I'd like to take a moment to introduce myself, Darlene Mann, and the members of the Budget Committee who are present this evening, which include Tom Whalen, Brian Rader, Raul Blanchet, Matt McGuire, and Tony Stanizzi. Cindy Van Conant and Dave Blinn have excused absences this evening. In place of Cindy Van Conant, who is the school board representative to the Budget Committee, Holly Durlow Babcock, the chairman of the school board, is joining us this evening. She will not be voting in the meeting, but she's present to discuss any of the school board issues or questions that we have this evening. And I'd like to also introduce Kelly Seeley, our BA for the district. If you could all please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
There's actually a flag on the wall. It's pretty good.
Yeah. There's actually a flag there.
Oops. Where's my agenda? I just had my agenda. Just give me 1 minute, see how I close my agenda.
Was it me that thing, or did you
That was
think?
you. I don't have that Apple thing.
I'll ask at this time if there are any agenda adjustments this evening. Seeing none, I'll appoint a meeting observer, which I believe is Brian. And, I have the approval of minutes before public input, so we'll do that. I guess that's how we normally do it. Okay. So at this point, we'll look for the approval of minutes for the September meeting. So I'll take a motion to approve the minutes as amended by Raul. I sent everybody a copy of the minutes with Raul's changes with the packet of information for this evening's meeting.
So moved?
Thank you, Tom. Second? Raul. Any questions, comments? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor of the amended minutes as distributed? Raise your hand, vote aye. Unanimous. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 0, 0. Seeing no public this evening, we can move right through public input and move on to the general business portion of the meeting, which is going to start with monthly results that I distributed to everyone through a link in the packet.
I apologize, I totally spaced on giving that to you for your packet, so.
No worries, it's easy enough. It was on the website, and the board packet included the year-end view that Kelly shared with us at the September meeting, in addition to the results through probably the very first part of October, if I recall correctly. I just am looking for a piece of paper that I can just write anything on. Okay, fantastic. So Kelly, if there's anything of note, I know it's early in the year. We would be through, about a quarter of the year, but the staff didn't return, the lion's share of the school year staff doesn't return until the end of August or beginning of September. So their salaries really aren't reflected in results to date, which you would be encumbering and things like that. So I didn't know if there's anything out of the ordinary or something you'd like to bring to our attention.
There really isn't anything too dramatic at this point in the game. It's very early. I think we will have some, somewhat of a surplus for special ed again, because we have some student changes yet again. So I don't think it will be as dramatic as it was the last couple of years. So other than that, there's really nothing earth-shattering too early.
I just think, I would say at this point, because you do encumber a lot of the, obvious salaries and benefits and things like that. I mean, I did notice that we are, there isn't a really sizable unreserved fund balance anticipated at this time. It would be, it would be impacted by those changes in special education or anything else that we see.
And because we encumber everything,
Right.
At the beginning of the year, so that's why it's hard to say what we're going to end up with at the end of the year at this point in time.
If I could just ask a quick question. I know that the districts are involved in rate setting for the current tax rate, and that as a result of legislation, the district, as well as the towns, might have received like an NHRS reimbursement. And I wondered if the district made a decision on how that was going to be, affect the tax rate, whether it would be for this year's tax rate or next
Yeah,
year's?
we were gonna include it in this year's.
In this year's,
Yeah.
okay. Do you know how much that
I knew you
was?
were gonna ask me that.
Sorry.
I have three
You can-
districts, three numbers. I think it's 81,000,
Okay,
I think.
all right. If it's anything substantially different, if you could just
Yes, I will.
let us know, that would be
definitely let
great.
you know.
So that would be included as additional revenue and contribute to reducing the tax rate,
Correct.
which should be set. I believe most tax rates, the DRA would like set by November 1st, so most districts are in the process
Yeah,
in that preliminary to final stage
Right.
at this point.
I think ours is finalized this week.
Okay, yeah, because once the school district provides their information for rate setting, it moves then to the municipality before everything is finalized with the DRA. Great. So, kind of getting to the heart of the matter of this evening's meeting for the FY24 budget overview. I finally got that right in our agenda. So all of our discussions this evening are really just kind of focusing on honing in on that FY24 budget overview, reviewing the assumptions, priorities, goals. The CIP will come later. The calendar for the district, a guidance discussion, a little overview of the SAU budget. And while those are identified as kind of individual items on the agenda, they all kind of come together as we kind of work our way through this. So I did share with everyone with the agenda our typical budget trend file, excluding the guidance sheets because of I just didn't have time to update them earlier with the agenda materials, but I did get the spreadsheet updated and distributed this morning. So I apologize if you didn't have an opportunity to review it. We'll lead through it. It is a preliminary guidance discussion, and we can address questions this evening, and any questions, kind of just throughout this process, anyone can feel free to reach out. So just kind of walking through generally the format of the budget file includes some preliminary guidance and guidance multiplier spreadsheets, a budget trend spreadsheet, which is really has our historical budgets to actuals, and includes the up through round 2 of the FY24 budget. It's a spreadsheet that now totals 860 individual line items. And it's something that we've just kind of maintained and utilized throughout the process. File also includes a superintendent's view, which I believe is shared with the school board as the process unfolds, and that's kind of the view the school board uses and references. There is a new items sheet, which identifies for every round of the budget, the original list of items that are being evaluated for the budget, and each round kind of addresses puts and takes to that list as we go through each round. We will eventually add a CIP and some of the actually I should probably update this, some of this additional information on the back end of the spreadsheet isn't really anything we reference anymore. So, with that format in mind, I would say that this is while it's round 2 of the budget for the administration, it's really kind of round 1 for us. It's the first view we're seeing. The administration and the business office works through some preliminary, the very, very, very first cut, and what they present to us is a round 2 version. We're lucky to have it as we consider discussing preliminary guidance earlier this month when the Hollis Budget Committee considered preliminary guidance. The budget view wasn't available. So it's something that's a nice extra to have as we're evaluating and considering preliminary guidance. So the way, as a reminder to everyone, there are 2 sheets included, highlighted in yellow at the beginning of the spreadsheet. One is a guidance multiplier calculation, includes a little bit more detail that then gets carried forward to the preliminary 23 guidance sheet. I typically add another sheet, actually, I have a second column on that preliminary guidance sheet that's listed as November guidance. So if we were to consider some other changes when we come back in November, that's where we would see kind of a change, or the kind of the final guidance that we're going to consider for the budget. So looking at the guidance multiplier, I'll just kind of remind everyone that the way we typically discuss, review, and build a guidance point for the budget is to look at the FY23 budget, take out things that are, and reduce it by items that are really not affected by factors like inflation and things like that. So in this case, it includes transfers for food service and special revenue, contingency and trust funds, which we wouldn't want to apply inflation or any kind of factor to, debt service, which is outlined by amortization schedules, special education, which is kind of reviewed in its own, outside of inflation, and is really considerate of the population of students that we'll be servicing or anticipating to service. The SAU budget allocation, which is again separately discussed and reviewed by a different subcommittee and brought forward by the governing board, and that amount gets assigned to us as a cooperative district. And we remove NHRS as well because of the way NHRS is calculated isn't driven by inflation, but it's driven by the biennial rate setting by NHRS. So the rates are set in 2-year increments, and next year will be a change to the rates, and so we remove NHRS, and then when it's recalculated in the new budget, it's a number that we put back in kind of after this calculation. So that takes our $26.9 million budget for the co-op, reduces it to a starting point of $16.5 million. Then make some, adjustments and considerations for what part of that amount is then related to salaries. And because most of those salaries are driven by either contractual arrangements or for administration, or the CBAs for the professional and support staff, they have their own increases that are calculated and estimated and shouldn't be affected by an inflation factor. So that brings the total amount of the $26.9 million budget that we're really considering applying a factor to down to $8.2 million. So there's a lot that comes out of the budget. It brings it, yep, 8.2 million. Yeah, so actually it's 8.3 million that would be impacted by a factor. So
Can you say that again? 8.3 is what?
really, if we were to apply inflation directly as just, or whatever percentage increase we're going to apply to the budget, that's the amount that's left that we're applying an adjustment to.
That's the amount of the adjustment up.
No, that's the amount that of the 26.9, that's what's left that we're working with. We're really affecting $8 million of the budget. What we then do, though, is kind of say,
I know I'm missing something.
no, that's okay. It's so, I don't know, I've been doing this for a really long time, and it's always so hard to
I know it all makes sense to you.
but it's always very hard to explain. So we start with 26.9. I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I'm going to do it with my hands.
So just to be clear, 26.9 is adjusted already with the budget multiplier.
No,
So
that's
that's
our budget.
before, okay.
26.9 is where we are today. That's the
Okay.
budget that
For this year.
the co-op is using for this year.
That's, all right,
So
fiscal
that's
2023,
this
yeah.
year's budget.
This year's
Yes.
budget.
Right.
Okay.
Everything all in, everything that we voted in at the last meeting, maintenance trust funds,
Okay.
bonds, leases,
It works.
the works.
Yeah,
It's-
okay.
It's where we started on July 1st.
Gotcha.
We take out all these things that we don't think should be affected by inflation or an adjustment, because they have their own
Okay.
adjustments, or like in the case of debt
Non-inflation
service.
adjusted items, okay.
Non-inflation adjusted items, like in the case of debt service is the best one to use. We have an amortization schedule.
okay.
We know what it's gonna be every year. It's not gonna go up unless we add to it. It's going to go down. So we wouldn't wanna put a multiplier on that and increase that
Okay.
cost in the budget.
the salaries and things like that were already negotiated and set.
Exactly. So we get down to a guidance base that includes salaries, but then we say, as you just said, we don't want to increase those salaries by inflation or anything, whatever this factor is going to be, because they already have their own increases that have already been contractually negotiated.
So
Or
do
they're
we-
going to be
do we
presented in
figure
a
that
warrant.
Like, so that doesn't, so the guidance multiplier does not go to salaries, but we know that salaries are gonna go up because we
Yes.
have a contract that has.
Yes,
Okay.
But
yes.
to
So
justify the
the-
contract.
That's going to
I
get
gotcha.
added back later.
I gotcha, okay.
Yeah.
So this
Nope.
is a very interesting process.
No, so this is, and so this,
Fascinating.
all of this little, like, the minuses are all to get to what are we going to actually apply inflation or a factor or an increase to? So we can either take a factor of like just straight, okay, we just want to say 2%, and we apply it to, or 4% or 8%, whatever, say 4%, and we can apply 4% to 8.3 million, or we can look at that percentage that salaries are of the remaining 16.5 million and say that's about 50%. So we take 50% of whatever factor we're going to use, and we apply the net of those two things to the guidance base.
And you get your 8.2.
No.
No, it's half of 16.5.
It is half of that. So we can either apply a full factor to 8.3, or in this case, half of a factor to 16.5.
Okay.
It'll get you to the same place.
Okay.
Sure.
But it's just a way to acknowledge collectively bargained or contracted salaries as a percent of the base.
It's more accurate. It's more accurate,
Yeah,
because you're taking out of the 26.9, those items which are not affected by inflation. And the net of that is 8.3. Which we could look at inflation on that number.
right,
I understood.
great.
Gotcha.
So then, once we decide on what that multiplier or inflation factor would be, calculate what that amount is, and add back what we're anticipating for FY '24. So we're going to put back in those food service transfers. We're going to add back in that debt service number. We're going to add back in special education costs. We're going to add back in NHRS. We're going to add back in the San Bernard's professional staff contract.
The 24 version of those parameters,
Yes.
not the 23 version, the
No,
24
no, we
version.
had, it was the San Bernard's
So there's
HEA
already a
agreement.
built-in
so
adjustment
it's like the
onboard
last
of
year
those
of the
items
HEA
that you
agreements.
took out.
Yes. So then, and then we arrive at a new guidance warrant article operating budget. So that gets its own article in our warrant. And then there are additional articles that we address at the district meeting that, for right now, include the third year of the support staff contract, the facilities trust, the special education trust, contingency is listed in the view that we have, and the SAU budget assessment. So those are all individual articles that are added to the warrant. They have a financial impact, and then I've added up the guidance operating budget view, added all the warrants that were recommended or in place right now from the administration. We get a total warrant amount, and then a total requested. So total requested is, I'll just call it, I'm going to change that actually. I'll call it total superintendent's view.
Okay.
So just so that we can tie it to like the superintendent's view sheet on our document, in our worksheet. And then I just have where we started for the total for FY '23 and do some percentage differences. And what we look at is the difference between where the requested amount is and where our total warrant view is. So right now, I did not change anything from the adjustment that we used last year. I just left it in the file. And it's I should probably highlight the box if you wanted to play with it and just move things around by yourself. It would be B13, would be B13. So I will highlight that on the
Are you
next
looking at
view.
the,
So if you're looking at the spreadsheet, I'm going to highlight it in purple, and cell B13 is kind of where you would put in your starting point of, so right now, it's tied to the Bureau of Labor and Labor Statistics inflation of last September. I shared with everyone where inflation is as of this September, which is 8.1%. I believed, I shared it in a link, so if you were to go into that sheet, there's a lot of information about the calculation. It is for, it was for the Boston, Cambridge, Newton, Mass, New Hampshire region. And as you click through the information, there's a summary, and then it, lays out inflation factors across various expenditure categories in our economy. So food and beverage, housing, shelter, fuel, utilities, and whatnot. So we stand at 8.1% as of September versus the 4%, which was last year. And the question becomes, how do we want inflation to affect a guidance view that we're going to put forward? There's a lot of conjecture on our part on whether we think inflation should affect the remaining amounts, whether you think it would, we're a year in advance of where this budget is actually going to be implemented. Do we think inflation is going to be at the same level, higher or lower? So those are kind of the discussions that we have as a budget committee, and to make a determination of where that kind of starting point or that factor should be to what we apply to that guidance base.
So clarifying that factor, you're talking about the information you're getting says 8.1% is the same relative factor as we applied last year. We applied the
Yes.
same number last year, but it was 4%.
Yep.
So we're going to apply that number to only the inflation adjusted items,
Yes.
which currently is about 16.5 million.
It's about 8.3 million.
Yes.
That's where I don't see that number anywhere.
You don't. That's correct, you do not.
Yeah, I don't see it on the sheet, so.
So you see 8.2, which is the amount of the
Anywhere.
salary costs. I will add a line to show the 8.3 for the remaining amount. But what we do is take that, just
Okay,
because I
help me.
want to add another layer of
Is that on the
complexity to this.
guidance sheet?
Well,
Just help me find the salary
I don't
one.
see the 8.2, that's what
That's
I'm.
what
I'm-
is-
Cell
is-
Line
B19,
Yeah.
Oh, so
B16,
that's
B19.
Yeah, B19.
B16.
I don't have the cell numbers, I
On
didn't
whi- on-
download your new
on
one.
which-
so-
Guidance
tab?
multiplier
Oh,
calculation.
guidance multiplier, okay,
Yeah.
I was in the wrong
Second tab.
sheet.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's why.
Yeah.
All
So
this,
we jump
this
sheets.
messy
Yeah.
part
Oh, I
was
can't
just
do
So
one
there's
sheet back.
8.2, okay.
Yeah.
Somehow I'm not
So
in the
prior
sheet.
fiscal year salaries to CBAs,
Ah,
8.2.
wrong sheet, perfect,
Yep.
now I'm at the right sheet.
16.5.
I didn't download the new the new
That's
version,
okay.
and I
And this
can't
is so
get
easy
on.
to see on a cell phone.
Yes.
It's fine, I just gotta follow along. I totally get it, I don't need to see it, I'm just go in my brain, I got it.
Okay,
So if you take 16.5 minus 8.2, you're left with 8.3,
Which is not on the spreadsheet. but
which is not on the
that's-
spreadsheet, but
but
will be in the
nevertheless.
next view.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. So that explains
I'm not meant to see that.
column, that explains, it's a secret. That explains column B. Column E is a column I added probably 2 cycles ago as a result of conversation we've had here about starting from, putting together guidance from a different vantage point.
that's the calculated FY
The
'24.
calculated FY '24 in red.
Yes.
Red doesn't mean anything bad, and I can change it to I can change it to blue or any other
Purple would
color.
be
It's just
nice. I like
to
purple.
differentiate it.
Tell me what calculated means.
It means I'm going to calculate what FY '24 is in a slightly different way. I don't know why I'm calling it it's just my own term for
Let's
it.
I just want to understand it. You can use any term you want.
Okay, calculated '24 means, rather than look at the way I just kind of explained it, we're going to start, it's just a different baseline. So instead of starting with the FY '23 budget as a baseline, we're starting with FY '22 actuals.
FY '22 actual.
So where we ended in June.
Okay.
Okay. So now, if we're starting from there, we need to take some consideration of what we voted in for FY '23. So we have to say, okay, we have a new lease agreement, that would get added on. We have a new collective year 2 of a professional staff agreement, we add that back in. We have year 2 of a support staff agreement, or year 1, year 2, that was approved, that gets added in. We have a CI, maintenance proposal, that got added in. We have, just various other changes that took place. If there was in this case, there was an NHRS change, we paid higher NHRS based on our salary base. And so those are the things that get added to where we ended the year, because we can't ignore what's going to take place this year. Last year, the next line is called, in this case, it's staff adjustment. Last year, it was a COVID adjustment. And I think, in a way, it still kind of is, but I'm calling it a staff adjustment because we aren't staffed as we begin this year where we need to be. We want to be, we intend to be, we're doing everything we can to be, and as a result, the underrun we had in FY '22, we would actually have more salaries and related benefits and NHRS and all the things that are
So you
related
want
to
to fund
that.
positions.
So
You
I
wanna
want to,
fund the
I want to bring that,
positions.
I don't want to start, this implies, I don't want to start at FY '22 where we underran our budget significantly because of special education and staff underruns.
Right.
I want to make up for that because they weren't staff cuts, they were just positions that couldn't be filled.
Vacant
Filled.
positions,
Right. This then anticipates, okay, we're filling them.
hopefully.
And then it goes through the same process that I just discussed. We take out transfers, take out contingency, debts, or blah, 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 takes that out to get to another guidance space, applying a factor, and things like that. We get to roughly the same place, 49, where of a factor that gets applied to a multiplier, anticipated increase gets added in, everything gets added back, and we end up with a budget view that's about $1 million different from the column B view. So last year when we did this view, and I don't remember the prior year, last year when we did this view, we were pretty close. We were in that,
Within like less than 100K.
I think so. And actually, last year, if we all recall, because I just want to keep remembering this, when we did our guidance calculation, we actually came in higher than the initial budget view from the administration. It has never happened before. I hope it'll happen again. But on that first pass, we were already higher than where the administration was. And they came back, I believe we applied a 0% just to kind of drop it, but the administration came back, continued to cut, continued to make adjustments, and exceeded our what we were anticipating for guidance. So right now, we're $1 million apart between those two views. So the conversation becomes, and is either view preferred? Is there something else we think we need to consider if we're considering the actuals view versus the budget view and kind of things like that? Just that kind of open discussion as a budget committee. So,
I have a question about the spreadsheet, actually.
sure.
At the bottom, there are
Yes.
3 rows that are repeated 3 times, and the text all seems to be the same, so what's
It's
the difference
not
between
the
them?
same.
So what am I missing on my
It's
tiny little cell
not
phone
the
screen?
same. So,
One is in bold, the middle one is in bold.
that's the
yes,
one I want
that's-
everybody to be looking at.
I figured.
So what happens once we look at these views is we often like to say, and when we put up warrant article information, we compare for the operating budget, the increase from the operating budget of the prior year, because the operating budget is less than the total budget. Because the total budget includes all the extra warrant articles. So if you were to look at the operating budget, which is the budget the Budget Committee owns, and the article that we put forward on the warrant, it isn't, you can't make a direct correlation between the prior year's operating budget, which is what the last set of numbers is. Because once that operating budget and the full warrant is passed, the additional articles become part of the operating budget. So to compare what you think are apples to apples when you're comparing the FY24 operating budget to the FY23 warrant article operating budget, it really isn't the same thing anymore. Because once you approve CBA's, debt service, and other elements, those items become part of your baseline operating budget. So the other categories were added. So in this case, I've highlighted or outlined and bolded lines 62, 63, and 64 because those include CBA's, so the HESA contract from last year, and the debt service that was passed in different articles. So that would really become your apples to apples comparison from an operating budget perspective. So if you're going to look at where the percentage or dollar increase from an operating budget only perspective, that's the comparison point. And then the other one just overlaid the CIP or the maintenance trust fund as an additional overlay. But really, in my experience, I would say the comparison point to the CBA's, and in this case, debt service, we don't always have that as an additional thing, but it was for the year that it was passed. That's really kind of the comparison point. So there's just points to kind of look at where we'd be, percentages we would be using in looking at specific articles versus a percentage we would look at if we were to look at like the total warrant. So if you're up at line 53 and we add in, just want to make sure I'm adding in all the right thing, 43 plus all of that. Once we take the operating budget that's calculated from whatever factor we decide on, add in the potential warrants, we come up with 28,372, which is a 5.5% increase from the budget, the full total, fully loaded budget we have now. And the superintendent's view, fully loaded with everything, is at 28.6 million, which is 6.5% above a total view. So those are just kind of just different points of comparison to look at and consider. So if we were to move forward today, the operating budget I would use in as backup information to discuss the operating budget would be what's in that highlighted box. Okay,
Got it.
that went better than I thought.
You did great. That was
That's what
very-
you think.
No, I thought it went really well, Darlene, for someone who doesn't know.
Good golly. It's been a long day. So, again, at this point, I would just welcome the discussion on if we think the inflation factor is if that's a starting point, if we want to consider starting with that, if we think at this point something in the 5 or 6% range is, something that wouldn't necessarily be appropriate. If we want to hear maybe some of the things that are included in the new items list that are driving some of the costs and things like that, there are always ways we can address items outside of kind of this guidance, and we call them like relief items. If there's a proposal that the administration puts forward that says, this is something, that we would like you to consider outside of guidance because it's important to, how we're delivering education in the school, or there's an important, change that needs to be made to the buildings, or, some capital issue or something like that. In the past, we've, when we've had a really high GMR estimate, we've considered benefits outside of, we've just kind of taken the number whole cloth when the number's been pretty excessive, because we have had some years where the percentage increases were excessive. So,
Can I ask a quick question?
yeah, sure.
in your calculated
Yep.
FY '24,
Mhm.
you put back in staff adjustments.
Mhm.
So one of the biggest reasons we had an underrun was special education.
Yes.
Did you put anything back in for that?
The
or-
amount put back in on the bottom is the estimated amount that's included in the FY '24 budget view,
Okay.
The second view or the first one?
the second view,
Okay.
round 2. I put that number, it's the same set of numbers in each column.
Okay.
So while we underran this year, the current budget assumed a student population and a budget that we're
Okay.
working with.
Okay.
And based on this population,
So
we're
that's
then
the
moving
number you're
forward.
using is like more the real number based on what the experts in the SAU office expect a special ed to be this
Yes,
year.
yes.
Based on what they know now, related
Yes.
to
Correct.
students that are currently in the district.
And that actually involves the entire district, because as students move up there,
Right.
I would anticipate they're
People
looking
that are-
at
right.
sixth graders in Hollis and
okay.
Brookline and that population to see what effect that has. And actually also consider the impact of other legislation, which includes providing student services through until
22.
somebody reaches 22.
And then
So,
when you do special education in the business office, you know who could need it. Do you have anything in the budget for, say, maybe one unanticipated student, or nothing's, it's just budgeted for who we have now?
Well, that's part of the contingency that we talked about.
I know, I
Well-
wasn't asking about the special ed trust. I was asking if there's any money in the budget for, I'm not saying there should be, I'm just asking, that's all.
yep.
No,
Okay.
we budget based on.
Based
our
on
current
students,
population.
okay, I probably should know that already, but
No,
I
it's great to ask, and a lot of districts handle it in different ways.
Right.
But
No, I will say though that, given, let's just say, one student, at this moment in time, we don't know if they're gonna cost this much or we're gonna cost that much.
Right, so
you know?
you are kind of
So-
estimating what you think their needs are gonna be and what, because
Yeah,
their
but-
needs could
but-
change, right,
But it's still based on our current
Okay,
population.
Yeah.
I just wanted
So
to
the
be
need,
clear.
there's the potential for the needs to change. I'm not sure how many, and I'm not asking for an answer. I'm not sure how many students may potentially cross into Massachusetts, and there
Right.
are some very significant rate increases that are anticipated, like double-digit increases
No,
for services and things like that, that we've been, that kind of have been brought to, to the forefront, just in, generally speaking, because of the economy. So there are lots of things to consider, and I would have to say, until this point, we've been very successful in managing, what's known about our population
right.
and
No, I get that.
estimating what those
I get
costs
that.
are, so.
I just wanted to be clear.
Yeah, and that was, I think, part of the reason why, because we don't add in additional, placements.
Right.
Say, 150 or 100 or 150,000 for an out-of-district placement, and we would consider 1 or 1.5 or 2, was part of the reason that we went the special education trust
fund,
route
right,
as a way to
right.
kind of
And
manage that.
when you said you're seeing significant increases in Massachusetts to what an out-of-district placement would cost, so.
Or
we're
service-
seeing-
or service- yeah,
we're
any
seeing
services. Mhm.
extreme, okay. And
But
just-
again, I don't know the percentage or if we send anybody to Massachusetts. So, just depending on what the services are, where they are, where they go.
That's good to know.
Yeah, there are some significant increases that are being anticipated, so.
So did E3, did that have some sped costs put back in that line item?
I added in the change in sped cost, and then to get,
Not the 1.2 though, not the underrun.
no, because we have a budget we're working from.
Okay, so that's only the change versus the underrun.
Yes,
Alright.
yes,
A's and B's that have no line numbers.
okay. Well, I'll just jump right in.
No, I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
I want her to give us an overview, a simple overview of the key changes that went from version 1 to version 2 of the superintendent's budget.
Okay.
Okay.
Brian?
I had a question specifically, in this preliminary version, the guidance multiplier is 4%. Is that just leftover from last
Yes,
year? Or
yes.
Okay, so it's,
Just
Right.
left there from last year.
All right.
I'm not trying to say that's the right place to start or end, it's just
Okay.
that's what we had last year.
All
It's
right,
kind of a
gotcha.
reminder of that's where we were.
yep.
Okay, if everyone's okay with that kind of new items discussion before we head back to preliminary guidance, there is a new items sheet in the workbook. And Kelly, do you mind?
No,
taking
that's
us through
fine,
that?
I can wing that. Okay, so in the category of academics, it looks like round one started with 116,000 roughly. We have 103,000 in round 2.1. And it's, just pretty minor changes. Like, for instance, the social studies department asked for 2 sets of maps, and we thought just 1 set this year, and we could do the next set next year. So those are pretty minor changes. Then in the heading of personnel, round one came in at 98,000 and we're down to 61,000. Probably the most significant things there are the shared positions that we have that we're not putting forward because we know Brookline can't do those positions, so we took them out for all 3 districts.
Okay, so we don't have, do we already have, one of the positions was the directed classroom sub.
Yes.
Did we already have one? Are we looking for another?
We do for
Okay.
all 3 districts, and because we can't even find
Right.
subs, we haven't really picked that person yet. We're
Yeah.
still hoping to, but. that
Yeah, I mean, it
hasn't-
does prove to be a real, there's a place for a sub every single day.
Oh, every
So,
day, every single day, yes. Okay, and then under the heading of special ed personnel and training, we started out with 105,000, and now we're at 52,000 in round 2. That difference looks to be the 504 para that we started with. We think we can do the same work, but using stipends and other resources to get to what we need. There's no new computer equipment in either round. In the replacement computer world, we started with 172, and we're still at 172 because we feel like all of those things are necessary. They push academics forward. The interactive flat panels are a fabulous addition to our world. The high school received 17 of them. The middle school, I think it was 9, if I remember right. So we just want to keep doing that until we can outfit our classrooms. And then the audio systems is another sort of game changer. We don't have that many. They have been used in the past for special ed students and limited other uses, but we want to put them in every classroom eventually. So we're working towards that as well. The shared services remain the same as well. And athletics, we started out with 14,600, which were basketball backboards in the middle school and a turf field sound system in the high school. It's our hope that the boosters might be interested in funding the turf field sound system. We've recently put a lot of money into the turf field in general, so, and the basketball backboards, we feel like can wait another year. In the safety compliance issues, we've taken out the carpool sidewalk from round 1.
I'm sorry, can we
to
just go back to athletics for a minute?
Yes.
Just want to remind everyone, we used to have an athletics maintenance trust an athletics expendable trust.
Yes.
And that's now been removed to a revolving account. And so while there are lines in the budget for various, pieces of the athletic budget, there are intended uses for the funds that are collected
Yes.
through the participation fees
Yes.
as well.
Yes.
So, maybe at some point later in the process, we can kind of just see an overview of kind of what's coming out using that
Oh.
athletics expendable trust
Sure,
money.
and I usually do that.
Yeah, later,
Yeah,
not
a little bit
with this
later,
review,
yeah.
so just wanted to kind of
Okay.
remind everybody of that.
Okay, great. And then under safety and compliance, we took out the carpool sidewalk, which is having a sidewalk going from the wrestling entrance all the way around to the if you're facing the building, the left side, to sort of, so that the students can get to the carpool vehicles that are waiting for them. We don't really have a way for them to do that now, but we might be looking at some renovations there, so we don't wanna put that in now and then have to rip it up if we decide to go forward with renovations, so we're gonna hold on that. And then, the facilities and maintenance, sections, we started with 1.3 million, and now we're down to 164,000. That's probably the biggest difference in all of this. And, there's definitely some small things in here, but we are also, removing some paving in the middle school, several, and let me just also say that we are, anything that's in light blue has been moved to the maintenance trust, so it may say 0, but it's not necessarily 0. So for instance, all the flooring in the middle school has been moved to the maintenance trust. And then we are going to hold on the roof section for the middle school. We're kind of hoping to get through all the high school roofing before we move to the middle school, but that may not exactly work out correctly. But as I said, in the high school, there's a paving project that we have decided to hold, or no, actually, I'm sorry, that went to the expendable trust, but there is one, the back paving, student lot, we decided to hold off on that one as well. And then the tennis courts, as you can see, we have there, didn't make it to round 2. And then there's.
They would have been on-site.
On-site tennis courts, yeah. And then there's a couple of renovations that we're going to hold off on, and that would be the school counseling renovation. I think what we've already done may do the trick, so we're gonna hold on that one. And then the main office reconfiguration, we were going to change some of the way it's accessed and move some people around. So that's the biggest difference, and then of course we moved several things to the maintenance trust, and those are the student dirt lot. If you recall, we put gravel in this summer, and it will just sit. It's sort of a prep to paving, and we'd like to do the paving next summer. We'd like to do the phase 8 of the roofing project, and we'll end up doing that along with phase 7, because we didn't do that this summer because of all the HVAC work that was done. So we'll end up doing 2 sections. One of them is already in the trust waiting for that project to happen. And then we already mentioned the flooring in the middle school. We have more HVAC upgrades to go in the middle school, and the elevator retrofit is really for the high school. It looks like it's for the middle school. Sorry, I'm going to move that back. So is that enough of an overview, or not enough, or?
No, it's good.
Okay.
So the next question is, how close do you think we are to the real final version of that view?
We have version 3 and 4 to go. That's how I'll answer that.
Okay, good, so there's,
I still have a lot of work to do.
Okay.
I can tell you that. I don't know if I have as much work as you guys will want.
I still remember the year we had like 6 rounds.
Really?
was like
I thought
3 or
we've
4
always
years
had
ago.
just 4 rounds.
No, we had at least 5, for sure.
Kelly said, oh, no.
I don't think so. I think,
don't
I mean,
remember
maybe I'm cheating by saying round 3.5 and round 3.8, but I've always tried to keep it at 4 rounds, so.
Okay. Let me also get back to this comparison of where we start, last year's budget versus the actuals. I've always found that it's a lot easier to comprehend and understand the flow, the methodology, when you start out from actuals. That's kind of my preference, and that's why I like to ask the question on that. But both methodologies that you explained are both very good. I mean, they're both sound and consistent.
I think I guess my
So-
biggest concern with, there are so many, with using the actuals, and I don't disagree that, that's typically a good starting point. Kelly's explained her process, looking at the budgets, and it isn't just like, oh, we carry numbers forward, we're looking line by line and things like that. I think, in some ways, it's definitely not a bad place to start, but when it's compounded by another year that we have to get through before we get to the implementation of, it's just, adds to the list of unknowns. So that's my reluctance, and I feel that we have, we've been using this guidance process for several years. It is consistent with how the Hollis Budget Committee applies its kind of guidance calculations, and they have adapted a little bit differently for the municipal side of things, but it is a consistent approach. I'm not sure from a Brookline Finance Committee side how they kind of look and address input to the Brookline budget, but I feel really comfortable that it's a methodology that we've, used consistently. And I think it's left us, in good, on a good track. I mean, we calculated guidance last year and we were already above the administration's view. So we were prepared to say, okay, we're gonna make adjustments to it, we'll reduce factors and, things like that. In considering, just to make it a little more interesting, I think. But I think what we hope to do is apply some methodology to it, so we aren't just taking wild swings at where we think things need to be. So, some other economic considerations to consider. I mean, obviously, all of this with a revenue component leads to a tax calculation. We expect tax bases to grow. I usually follow up with Tad Putney in Brookline to see what the estimates are for the Brookline community as we move forward to estimate tax rates.
It's Scott now.
Oh, is it? Who is it?
Scott.
Scott who?
Butcher.
Scott Butcher, thank you.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes,
Tad
he's,
retired.
He
Yes.
did. Amazing. All right. Well, I will follow up with Scott then. And even looking at those tax bases, the Hollis Budget Committee went with a typically very conservative view of just a 1% increase in the base. And I know there's a lot of construction going on in the town, but really just to be conservative, really just only applied that 1%. That gets kind of trued up as we set rates next year. So again, it's just I feel comfortable with it because we've been working with this factor methodology for so long. I don't really think it's led us really far astray. And maybe what we could do is, move ahead with this and then just do another comparison to where we end 23 and see if where we, if ending 23 puts us, more closely aligned. I think one of the things column E doesn't address either, we do expect and anticipate returning $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 to the taxpayer, and I would be very concerned that the view put forward in column E really doesn't allow for much to be returned to the taxpayer. It would be, I think, it would, I think, just be a hard budget to work through. But that's, my opinion.
I'm just thinking out loud, when you talk about actuals, looking at actuals, then you have to start factoring in things, so you're dealing with actuals. So by the time you do that, you say, well, how much do we return to the taxpayers? What thing was 1.9 or something? And then you look at it and say, what funds were put into a reserve account? I'm just kind of talking out loud, but if you can get down to actuals, then you can work with actuals, except that there's just so many things that go on within those numbers. You gotta start manipulating things to get to an actual, and if that was the case and you were doing that, I would say that would probably work out and build factors against that, but unless you do that, you're not dealing with the actual actions.
both methods require a lot of manipulation of the
Yes.
numbers to get down to something that we have control over and whatnot. There's like a $1.1 million difference between the two views. What's the big factors that I would expect them to be, and they are very close to each other. $1 million on this scale is not much difference, but something.
5%?
I think the biggest driver is the starting point, because we did have a year where we were just so
Yep.
We just really underran the budget.
Yep.
Because when we did it last year, we were pretty close to where the guidance view brought us. So if you were to, so right now with the 4%, not even, we haven't even had an, discussion about inflation. House Budget Committee used a multiplier of 0, and, after having the inflation conversation. So changing that factor and adjusting the multiplier down to 0 would put us at a $600,000 difference from the current superintendent's view to where our budget guidance would be. So, that might be a consideration. It's really hard to say where inflation will be. I don't know, Kelly, if you've gotten some inkling or what's put in the budget for like utilities and increases that we're anticipating to see there, or.
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely higher than, what we're anticipating is definitely, what we're experiencing is definitely higher than the budget currently, and what we are anticipating based on that is probably higher than, or around the inflation factor that you're talking about. So, 0 in some cases is gonna be way off in a bad way.
Right.
So, but then in other ways, it might not be. We're hiring newer staff that could
Right, they
offset
they
it.
cost less money, right, they
Possibly,
lower
but,
on the salary
it's
tables and
hard.
things like that.
Don't
Yeah,
quote
it
me on
is.
anything.
No, and every year is different, and we have different levels of retirees, and, which hasn't even come in yet.
No.
If lane changes by staff, there might be more professional development,
Yep.
as, people are, you can have remote options for, getting additional credits to your degree.
Let me just say that on that point, on this point that you're discussing right now, I would be comfortable with starting with a 0% multiplying factor, having you come back with, this is my best budget, and if, say, that's 3% higher, then we'll adjust the multiplying factor to a 3% to match what
Sure.
you're coming up with. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I
That
do.
way, the responsibility for coming up with a good budget is on you, right? I don't know.
No pressure.
I think we're missing something though. We budgeted a 4% last year, based on an assumption that 4% was going to be last year's inflation rate, when actual came in at 8 something. So we,
So we'll return 1.5 or whatever the
well,
number was
let me
back.
finish. So the actual inflation rate was double what our prediction was. We were saved only because of COVID. And our reduced operating rates, our reduced special education, our reduced teacher costs, our reduced bus service, everything that was reduced because of COVID brought us down to that 4% number. So we ate it last year. It just doesn't show in the numbers. So if we're starting a budget this year at plus 4%, that's actually 0. 4 from last year, 4 from actual, 8% inflation. Our baseline is 4%. But what's good about this methodology is, and something I wanted to say to Raul, because I understand what you're saying about you want to use actuals versus predicted. If they're reasonably close or explainable, then it really doesn't matter which one you use. What's really important is what Kelly does with each line item, and she's got that fine-tooth comb, and I feel very comfortable that we're analyzing each line item one at a time and going back into the budget suggestions and saying, well, we don't need that here, but we do need more here. So our number might not be 8%, but
Right, and in her line-by-line evaluations, there is a built-in estimation of cost increases, for example, and that's what so the actual number reflects that, an inflation already.
But her experience, like she's explained though, her experience in this field will be more useful than a flat multiplier. If she
Yes.
thinks we're gonna hire less expensive teachers, and that will offset the number of teachers that we didn't hire last year or didn't have on staff last year, okay, that's a very well designed number, I think. It's very accurate, as accurate as it can be.
So starting with a 0 allows us to gain visibility in what she's doing.
I'm just saying it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where
Okay.
you start. I'm just saying, the reality is it was 8%, and so other than, unforeseen circumstances, our force majeure happened last year, which never does.
Right.
You know, and if it hadn't happened, I would doubt we would give anything back. We'd probably be looking for money from the
Yeah, if
taxpayers.
we hadn't had the windfall with special ed and
Right.
unfilled positions, we could be having a very different
We'd be at
We
8%
would be having a
inflation
different conversation.
on a 4% budget.
When you look at item by item inflation, are you just taking like an 8% inflation? Or are you looking at the category and saying, well, you know, heating oil is up by, 30%.
Right. Yeah, I'm-
Utilities are up by
Electrical
whatever
doubled.
percent.
Right, we're not
Something is
applying
only
a percentage to every category because, there may be as something that the teachers are buying that is cheaper than it used to be, you know what I mean? So we trust them to tell us what they plan to buy or to spend on that camera or whatever it is. And then, yes, we're gonna reevaluate the utilities in a very different way, so, yeah.
And some
no.
of the other major drivers, like when we're looking at NHRS, it is a biennial rate setting and the rates are actually dropping.
Right,
And I would say 2 years from now, to expect a substantial increase,
Yeah.
because the rates never drop. So they're gonna be making up for that. So in a couple budgets, we'll be having this conversation saying, yep, those rates went up by a significant amount. So, but right now, they're going, down, for FY '24 and FY '25. Our GMR is, I think you said around 4.1%.
it's 4%.
4% was.
And it was in FY '23 too, so we're
Yeah,
very
so
stable right now.
that's excellent.
Yes.
Some other districts are in the 18 or 20% range.
Right, and the
Um,
state rate was, I think, 8.4, something like that, so.
Right.
we're
So,
below.
we're utilizing our benefits wisely and things like that. So there are, those types of, so using that as a factor to calculate benefits, below the current inflation rate and, hopefully aligned to where we are next year,
right.
so.
But health insurance isn't just, it's a 4% increase, so we're gonna increase the line by 4%. We do not do it that way. We look at what the employees have, and we also say, okay, we hired, we didn't really, but let's say we hired 10 young teachers, so they're likely to have maybe single plans instead of, family plans, which the retirees had that just left. So we look at, the details.
Right, and I mean,
of
and
this.
based on what you know about staffing too, you're able to also say and anticipate maybe there are some teachers that are on a two-person that we know, are gonna be out on long-term maternity leaves and they're gonna be moving to family plans, like,
Right,
and
so
things
we
like
look
that,
at
so.
all of that. We don't always guess right, but, we
Yeah, it
try.
does help kind of align things.
Yes.
There's a lot that goes into it.
Yes.
So, in our budget calculations, one of the last steps, for applying the multiplier is to take out the salaries. Does that include benefits or is that just salaries? Because I'm basically wondering, is for the amount that we're applying the budget multiplier to, does that include benefits or was that taken out already?
No, it
No,
does
it's just
not
the
include
it does not.
benefits, no.
That's a different multiplier. That's not affected by the contract as much as it's affected by
Right.
the insurance policy, right?
Okay, so when we come down with a certain number and then we subtract out salaries, we're also subtracting out the benefits from that before applying the multiplier?
No,
No.
So do we apply the multiplier to the benefits?
yes.
Yes, okay, great, that's what I was looking
Yeah.
for.
Then you go back over it and say, well, that's not that number, it's this number
Yep.
because of GMR, so.
All right, so we've got a 26 or so million dollar budget, but we've narrowed it down to, there's really just 8 million that we're applying this budget target factor to, and that includes the benefits, it includes a lot of maintenance, it includes electricity
supply
and
items.
electricity and
Supplies.
oil
And that's
and
a factor
gas
in
and things
addition
like
to what's
that.
already been
And-
built into it by her process.
No.
Yes. Because when they come up with line items in the original budget view, they already have an estimated calculation on what to expect.
But we're taking last year's budget, multiplying it by a factor here to come up with next
That's
year's
the
overall
process she
budget.
explained, that's correct. So the question is, but when you then compare that
To what
with
I'm doing,
her
yes.
views, based on
Yeah, your views,
your
yes.
process.
Yes,
You
yes.
already, when you say, I think we're
Right.
gonna put so much for electricity in the budget, you're already taking into account some assumption about what the
Okay.
inflation could be.
Okay, yes.
You see what I'm saying? So-
Yes, in their view of the, in their detailed view of the budget, yes, not in our preliminary guidance.
Right, so if you think
Yes.
of the 8-point-some million as the operating budget,
Yeah,
that's why I rather see their view first before we make the adjustment to try to come up with a compromise, because they're one step ahead already calculating some level of increases in all the key items.
they go into much more detail than
You see
than
what
we
I'm
do
saying?
at this
So
level.
you're saying you don't really want to give them preliminary guidance? You just
Well,
want it
that's
to
why
be
this is
zero?
just guidance.
No, no, the minimum preliminary guidance, right, and the final version of the preliminary guidance. If you think of preliminary guidance as a range,
Right.
I want to give them the
Well, so,
minimum number,
but
but with flexibility to increase it later.
But what we've always done is given them preliminary guidance. They've come back to us with something that might or might not meet that preliminary guidance, and then we make adjustments from
Right.
there to it. So,
They've proven that they exceed our expectations with
They
their
have.
guidance view.
That's
and
why I asked if
I
we
do
had
trust,
one or two
I
more
mean,
rounds of this.
I don't
Yeah.
feel like it's blind faith. I mean, if using, if we even used the same factors as last year and we see $269,000 difference, if Kelly were to come up with $400,000 worth of differences, they're going to bring a budget that's $400,000.
Absolutely,
Yes.
I'm not gonna go,
Right.
oh, I have 400,000.
We can
but
stop
I'm
there
just-
just because the budget
No,
committee said so,
yeah.
Listen,
like, yeah.
I totally trust you, you and the superintendent to go through the process, and you've demonstrated that over the years, so I'm,
Okay.
Yep.
I personally have the trust, so,
Okay, good.
so kind
I'm
of
not looking to play games to come up with numbers just for doing so.
Okay.
So kind of what we're doing is really giving them a target to do, and they put together a budget that goes close to that target, bring it back to us, and then we kind of look and see what sort of trades they've made, and we may decide that, okay, well, let's cut it back even further and take out some of those other things, or we may go the other way and say, well, you took out some things that we think should be in there, and we can adjust it
Right,
upwards.
right.
So it's just to get us in a ballpark.
Right.
See
Right.
what that looks like.
And, just in consideration of other articles, there is a third year of a HESA agreement and the potential that there might be a sidebar associated with that.
Yes, in fact, a tentative agreement has been met. We
Oh.
just need the board to ratify it and the union to ratify it. So
Okay, great, so
I should
probably have that for
we'll
November.
have it in round 3, yeah.
And
Okay.
that's gonna be included as a line item in the.
Yep,
It'll
No,
be a
because
warrant.
It'll be a
it's a
warrant, it'll
warrant,
be a-
because it's
Oh,
not a
that's a separate
standardized
warrant.
contract, so
Yeah,
it'll be a
probably
warrant.
added to the current.
because it's not something that's gonna be implemented this year.
No,
As a
no,
sidebar,
no.
it's gonna be added, so.
Yes.
Right, and it would be it's a warrant, because the HESA contract's not standardized.
Right.
So it's not built into the budget already, so
Right. Okay.
I think that's right.
We have the expendable trust, we have the special ed expendable trust, and I see the $125,000 for contingency is back. And I anticipate that the level at 125 is because you're not considering pursuing a change to the retained fund balance
No,
percentage?
I put
or-
that in there as a placeholder.
As a placeholder.
So an either
Okay.
or kind of thing.
Further discussion.
Because the board hasn't even discussed that yet.
No, we
Okay.
haven't
I
talked
wanted
about
to,
Yep,
Can
have
I
a
just
place
make
for
one
it.
comment about this whole process, because it's fascinating to me, and I'm not a numbers person, but ultimately, at the end of the day, the school board wants a budget that's gonna fund what we need for our kids. So, and we trust Kelly to do that, and we trust the process that you guys have used, and clearly, there's 47 different ways to do this. Or maybe 46, but we appreciate all the time and effort that you put in to doing, all of you put into doing this. But ultimately, at the end of the day, what matters is the kids and getting what they need, and the students and the staff getting what they need, and the entire staff, so.
And I think we're all in
And-
agreement on that
Right,
point.
I know,
Right,
I
and
just, I'm
you
the
know,
school board rep here, so I'm gonna just say that.
I know that the superintendent always has the consideration of the elementary districts in mind too, because he has that overall arching view of every project and everything that's being put forward, and he always has the impact to the communities in mind as he's considering recommendations and changes to what's being requested and things like that, which I greatly appreciate. So the one last question I think I have, just with regard to content items for the warrant, is if there is the potential for a bond or a larger scale project or renovation or anything like that, if we anticipate seeing anything?
Well, that will be up to the school board.
Okay.
I mean, we are discussing that internally right now. We'll very likely be putting something forth to the school board. I can't say it's gonna be fast. It's probably more in the round 4 version or
Okay.
timeframe.
Okay, but just something for us to kind
Well,
of
and
have in mind.
if you've watched any of our meetings, Andy has come forth with, he's applied for building aid.
Yep.
That the district's applied for building aid in multiple districts. And so, yeah, I mean, when you apply for building aid, you need to put forth a project. So projects have been put forth to the state with the idea that, maybe they could fund part of it. So obviously, if we get to the finals of that, you might see more on that.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure something will be put forward.
Yep.
We just have to get the numbers and do the research and
Mhm.
make it a solid proposal.
Mhm. Okay.
So, Darlene, would you like to propose what you're comfortable with and let us
I would
discuss
like,
it?
I would like some,
Some input.
sure, I would probably move forward, keeping the inflation at that 4% range. It nets to a multiplier of 2%. Again, it's either 4% on 16 million or 4% on 8 million or 2% on 16 million. It's all it ends up being the same. And that puts us at a difference of just under $270,000 between the view we have today and the view that the district has proposed. But again, happy to entertain the discussion.
So that's guidance that's
I have a question first.
Guidance of 2%, yeah.
I have a question though about that. If more about our role here, are we supposed to give feedback to the school district about what's going on in the economy, about what we anticipate is happening, what's actually happening, or are we supposed to be looking at the dots on the impressionist painting and saying we need more yellow dots and fewer blue ones to make that green?
I would say, like, using inflation and things like that, it's a way for us, it's without doing what Kelly does, there's no way for us to put a stake in the ground on, all of the aspects of the budget and what percentage we think they're going to move, like what percent they are of the budget. I mean, that Bureau of Labor Statistics summary has inflation factors for all kinds of things. And, we could go in and pick utilities and apply 12% there and 6% there and 2% here and,
Which is what will actually be done eventually. Like
yeah, but it's, and it's our kind of just perspective of, and it is, like throw the dart. We don't know where we're going to be next year. So, if we wanted to have, if we thought we were going to be in the same position, and we want to make it 8%, then that didn't work when I just put that.
Be over their guidance.
Yep.
Well, I think I made the argument before, but I think if we're looking at this from real world numbers, a 4% adjustment for this cycle is essentially 0 from last year's cycle, based on inflation numbers. And we know that, and we often hear in the annual meeting about fixed income people not being able to keep up with inflation. Well, they just got an 8.2, I think, 8.1% boost in,
Social Security.
yeah, Social Security payments. So I think that argument is probably less efficient than it has been in past years. And I would just, my 2 cents worth is I think if we start at 4, we're not offering any increase. That if we start at a number of 8 over last year's inadequate number of 4, and it's not a critical statement because no one can anticipate, oh yeah, inflation is going to double next year, but I don't think we expect inflation to be negative next year. So that being the case, if we anticipate any inflation at all next year, we should probably add that number to the 4% as our baseline.
So Kelly was already saying that her numbers represent some inflation factor. So So what we're saying is 4% over her inflation.
Well,
Yeah.
that was the purpose of my question earlier about whether we're to give, financial guidance based on what we know about the economy, or if we're supposed to give guidance based upon what we know about what's happening at the finite level in the
I
school
mean, it
district.
could be
there-
both. I
Yeah.
mean, we can, it's a starting point, but it can be,
Good. There are
Either
two
way.
different budgets here. There's the budget that Kelly's been working on, the round two and whatnot, which has all of the details, and it's got a lot of, gone into all of the inflation factors and so on to it. And that results in the superintendent's current total that's in there. Our budget is last year's approved budget that we're going to take the 8 million out of and apply an adjustment to it, and then take the other big items, out of there to it. And then that's kind of the target for the administration to try to get to that number. So those are kind of two different
But
two
it-
different things.
8% on $8 million out of $26 million, it's only that makes it a what?
it would,
Almost less than a 2% increase
Well,
in the
keep
total
in mind
budget.
that we're only talking about the 8 million out of the budget, because
Right,
the
so
rest of it's
if-
taken into consideration in other ways.
Right, well, that's
You
what
may
I'm
have
saying,
larger
it will
factors.
offset some of those other increases that we can't control. The non-inflation adjusted increases, like the contract increases and those kinds of things that aren't part of that 8 million.
so if I were to put in 8%, our preliminary guidance view would be greater than the view that we have right now.
Well, and I also saw they took a lot of things out of the proposal. We took out things I think are
Well,
necessary, like
they-
roofs and
Well,
paving and
but they
maintenance.
just moved those to maintenance trust, so there's a
Okay.
there's a separate warrant article for funding to go into the maintenance trust
Okay,
to cover
that's-
those things.
Right, but we have
So they've
people,
really just,
So things
which
that-
is a good thing.
but we have people on the
But-
school board who don't like that, who don't believe that the maintenance trust should be used in that way, that the maintenance
Well-
trust was established to be a savings account for an item in maintenance that is catastrophic or crisis. That's what,
Unanticipated, maybe?
unanticipated, that's the right word, thank you. And so we have that conversation with a member of our board every year, and 2 or 3 are starting to feel the same way he does. The maintenance trust should be not used regularly every year to be for maintenance, but that maintenance should be in the budget, because taxpayers need to understand that maintenance is part of having these grounds and these facilities. So that's
right.
his argument. I'm not presenting that argument, although I sound pretty passionate about it, but
pretty
it's
good,
not. I'm just
Holly.
presenting his argument, like,
Yeah.
so he doesn't see, he and a couple other members don't see that that's where maintenance should go. And there's a real struggle, and it's Tom, you know who I'm
Yeah.
talking about, because Tom Solon, and he's been on the board for a really long time, and he was here when the board sort of established the maintenance trust, and the conversation was, it was for wasn't contingency, because it's unanticipated related to to facilities. Contingency could be used for other things, like, having to hire extra people because we end up with 400 new students or something. So that's what, we hear a lot on our board when we talk about the maintenance trust, and he regularly votes against the warrant because he doesn't like the way it's being used. So that's just another viewpoint on that. And so when Tom says we've already taken out, it looks like
The roofs.
like $600,000
Elevator repair.
worth of maintenance things that are not, these are not items that are fancy. Like, they're not special. It's not a swimming pool. Maybe the tennis courts are the only thing that you could say, those are, discretionary. But a lot of these things have to get done eventually. So when we keep going to that trust, it's not the way some members of our board feel it should be used. And that it's almost like it's a little bit misleading to the public, because these are things that have to be done eventually. That's just his point. You've heard it, right? So,
The budget itself, though, does include other
Yes.
capital
Yes.
Oh.
maintenance items
Right.
as well. So,
And you've done a great job, Kelly, laying that all out. Don't, I'm just,
Yeah.
you know.
But what you're saying is it doesn't matter to us.
Well, right.
You'll come back and tell us to put it back in the budget if the
Yeah.
school board votes to put it in the
Right.
budget as opposed to maintenance trust, that's fine.
In the
Doesn't
end,
matter.
it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
I mean, we've patterned it, how we're doing it based on how Hollis does it, which has been very successful for them. So I
Right.
think that's why we started moving that direction, because Hollis has made a very good, case for doing it that way.
Yeah, and I always vote, like, I'm fine with the way you're doing it. I'm just saying that that definitely is a bone of contention for
Yep.
certain members of the board and potentially for members in the community. So, and there's two different ways of looking at that. And that was a whole numbers thing that I talked about.
It's just a
It's
shell
weird
game.
for me.
But, well, it's not entirely, there's an advantage to doing it the way that we do, though, which is that it gives the voters, it takes off a slice of significant maintenance work for it and put that separate, as a separate vote to the voters.
Sure.
So we get instant feedback from how the voters are feeling about things as opposed to just being lumped into the overall budget for it. That
And-
gives us a better sense of how are the voters feeling towards this, which we can apply to future years as well.
And
And
when
it does give them an opportunity to make some cuts without just rejecting the entire budget.
That's a good point.
So,
That's an SB too, but you can make the adjustments in our budget process in Hollis.
Yeah, you can.
you can,
Right.
but
You don't have to cut it by, so when we present the maintenance trust, just refresh my memory, do we present what we're gonna be using it for?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, Brian, that's a great argument, and I'm gonna remember that.
Can I make a motion for us to take a vote on Darlene's suggested recommendation?
so, let's put it out there and then have a discussion.
Right. So I'm gonna make a vote that, am I saying it right?
A motion.
I'm gonna make a motion, right, that's right, for us to accept Darlene's recommendation of a 4% adjustment factor on the operating budget,
okay, it would be
multiplying factor.
Multiplying factor.
Isn't it preliminary guidance, isn't that the word
Yes.
you wanna use?
how about we say, to avoid, so applying that 4%, which gets us to the adjusted factor, which gets applied, can we use the dollar amount?
Yes,
Okay. So that would be we would be setting preliminary guidance on the operating budget at $26,694,888.
What was that number again?
$26,694,888.
I think
That's
3/8 is good luck. Just saying.
That's, again, the guidance for the operating budget article.
and that is based on the
Based on a-
methodology number one that you described today.
Right, applying the 4% inflation factor to arrive at the adjusted multiplier.
4% on the 8 million.
20, where are you getting that number? In the spreadsheet, I'm
Yeah,
seeing
B-
28,327,000.
28,372,354.
Yes.
Would be the total warrant amount after adding
Ah,
in the additional
gotcha.
articles. So 26,694,888 is in the blue box on line
Gotcha.
43.
That's the operating budget, right.
694.
So that was Raul.
Did I need to know?
And is there a second?
Second?
Seconded by Matt. Okay, any discussion?
Yeah, so in looking at that versus where the administration is right now, there's a difference of $270,000. And looking at where we're at right now with round two of the new items tab in there, there's not a lot in there that I would necessarily want to cut back on. There's a lot of things in there that are kind of cyclical, upgrading the computers, upgrading those kinds of things. I would, and especially given that we're seeing 8% interest, 8% inflation out there. Personally, I would be a bit more comfortable with a 6% figure instead of the 4%. Which brings us to an operating budget of $26,864,904. and that's about $100,000 below where the administration is right now.
What did you say the number was, Brian?
26,864,904. Is that right?
26,864,904.
And are you
Yes.
looking at 26,898,443 as the superintendent's number?
I'm looking at 28,641,068 as the superintendent's number.
That's the whole budget.
That's the whole budget.
Okay.
I'm looking at the whole thing.
Okay.
So we're adjusting the operating piece and adding in the anticipated
I
articles.
gotcha.
Yep.
Basically, what you're saying is, you're about $100,000 off after round 2, so they need to cut $100,000 between round 2 and round 3.
That's
round
my,
4.
that's,
Accept that number.
that's my proposal.
Like to
And
cut
the 4%
100
was
So,
thr-
so if
200
I,
and
as
some
the
odd
school board
thousand.
member, if I take a look at the new items, that's where you would find most of your cuts, right, is in these new items?
There's also other adjustments that tend to happen as we get closer, as they get better numbers for
Okay.
things.
Yeah, we'll know, like,
So-
different numbers
So
for
it's not like you're just
retirement.
gonna go through this and be like, round 2, got to get rid of $100,000, because
Oh,
that's,
no,
okay.
And to Brian's point, I would say we are close to being done making cuts in new items. but
Okay.
There are a lot of unknowns in the actual lines, and there's a lot of tightening up that I need to do as well, so.
But to my question earlier, I asked her how many rounds do you expect beyond this one? How close are we to final? And she said there were at least 2 more rounds.
Well,
So
I
there's
should
Well-
have prefaced that by saying it depends on what guidance is, too, because if you're gonna
Right.
make me cut $1 million, we might be at 6 rounds, but if you're gonna have me cut 100,000, maybe we're done in 3, I don't know.
Right.
Yep. So, yeah, we provide this, they come back with a round 3, then we look at that and we make some final adjustments to it to get us at a round 4. That's typically how it works.
Yep.
Okay, so if that's a consideration you'd like to make, I would ask Raul to withdraw his motion. And we
Or-
would, or you can amend,
I will make a motion to amend the current motion to use a total of $26,864,904, and we'll see if there's a second to that.
And that puts us still below,
It's still 100,000 below
okay.
total value the
Okay.
administration's put forward.
The total value.
I see Tony seconding that. Okay? So we now have 26,864,904 on the floor for any comments or discussion. Even though we already had a little bit, so.
If we went
So
to
the-
8%, that would get us 27,018, somewhere in there?
Yep, if we go to 8%, that puts us above the current view.
How far above current is that?
71,000, so that would put us at, 27,035.
So either way, we're dancing around it by
So you
$100,000.
go to 6.5 or
Yes,
Be done
We-
tonight.
we can calculate the percentage given their numbers.
Anybody have any sevens?
I think 6 sounds good.
So
I'll
you're
second
gonna-
that.
So we need
So-
to take a vote on the
Oh, I
amendment.
think we had a
on the
second
amendment.
by
Yes,
Tony.
Yes, we have to vote on the amendment.
So we have to vote on the amended.
Unless there's further
motion,
discussion on it.
Unless there's any other discussion. Okay, seeing none. All those in favor of setting preliminary guidance for the FY24 budget at, operating budget at $26,864,904, please vote yes. 1, 2, 3, 4. Opposed? 2, 0. The motion passes. Okay, so you have your preliminary guidance, and of course, we would greatly appreciate any improvements you can even make on that number as we move forward, so.
We would not say no to less.
Yeah.
I definitely, if I can do it, I will, for sure.
Okay, so let me save that view. Are there any other questions at this point on the budget file or the new items or anything else? And if we can address that now. If you do have any questions, please forward them to me and I can collect them and get those to Kelly in advance of the next meeting. Let me save it one more time to make sure I don't lose it. Just looking, one of the other attachments I forwarded to you was the calendar for the, it's a composite calendar for the entire SAU, so it includes the Brookline information for their deliberative sessions, public hearings, and election days, as well as Hollis and the co-op. So we would be having our public hearing for the co-op on February 2nd with a snow date of the 3rd, and looking at district meeting on the 8th.
Right.
And there's a snow date of the 9th that could be used as a second date, which I'm sure we will not need, but we're in that kind of 8th, 9th window for March. So please mark those dates on your calendar. I mean, they are subject to all the districts kind of looking at them. I'm not sure where we are in the queue,
Yeah,
but
you're
you do a really
towards
good
the
job of
beginning.
aligning us all and making sure we're within the statutory guidelines and things like that, so.
When
Okay.
is the election? When is voting day in March?
It is the 14th.
14th.
So the co-op meeting would be before,
15th,
Right,
right?
and just in
Oh,
case
14th.
anybody doesn't know this, we have a deal with the Brookline Selectmen that we trade every other year. So the co-op is before the voting day in this year, and next year will be after the voting day.
Right, I feel like we haven't been before in a long time, so,
No.
it's only been 2 years, but,
It was.
but I guess with all, well, you know
It was
what?
COVID.
With all of the delays in
Yeah.
COVID, we were voting in like April and
Yeah.
June and
Yeah.
everything else,
Yeah.
does
so.
Hollis ever vote before? Do they ever have their meeting before?
No, they don't seem to care. I mean, it usually doesn't work out that, well, I guess, yeah, they would. The years that the co-op is after, they would probably be before.
Before,
Okay.
right around.
I don't really care that much, doesn't it? It's just
Okay,
Just
yes,
early
so
dates,
Hollis,
less time to
Hollis
get
would have a
info.
public hearing on the 7th and district meeting on the 15th with snow days the day after. Brookline has a public hearing on January 11th. The schedule is different for an SB2 community.
Yeah.
So their public hearing is the 11th. Their first deliberative session is the 8th. And the second deliberative session is really the day of voting day, which is the 14th. Okay, great. I did want to share, I don't think anything changed. I did share with everybody the SAU budget view, and I'm not sure which view I shared with you before, but what this view included was an adjustment to the FY '23, the budget that was used to do the comparison points. So this view reflects the FY '23 adopted budget. It identifies some additional expenses that were voted in by the governing board, and then does a comparison to FY '24. So the levels of the numbers haven't changed. I think you had 4% in there when you, for the GMR.
Oh, no, we had 5%.
Oh, you had 5.
The next version has about a $2,000 decrease
Okay.
because of that difference.
So we're right now looking at an increase, really, it really is salaries, benefits, and there's really not a lot of extra additional things in there. I think we had a portable for storage and things like that. But it is right now at a 7.8% increase over FY '23.
It'll be 7.6 when the next version goes.
Okay, so that will drop a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know if if there are any other questions on that, please feel free to reach out with those. At this point, did I just close my agenda? No. I did not. Okay, great. So we'll look to Holly for the school board update.
So what kinds of things does Cindy usually update you on?
Anything you might have had a financial discussion about, like, if you had that discussion about forthcoming capital projects, or.
Well, we did. In the last couple of months, we've had, you'd have to watch the meeting because I don't have all the details in my head, but we've had a couple of presentations from the superintendent regarding an application for building aid, and the projects that would impact the middle school and the high school. These are not major things, but they're changes that could really make a difference in the lives of the building.
And is it part of like a multi-year plan?
I believe there's been a lot of work done with an architect on, what the buildings could use, what they need in the future, and this is sort of one phase of them, would you say?
It definitely could be multiple phases.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So
Right.
I think it just depends on the discussion. We're trying to prioritize what we would like to do. So, you know, if the school board decides, okay, we want to do half of this, then we'd have the
Yeah.
cost for the next phase.
And I
Right.
just want to let people know, so the state has reinstituted the building aid. I don't know if you're all aware of that. You always keep everybody up to date on that. But, so with the major transitions in the superintendents of schools across the state, meaning that there were 20 openings for superintendents, our superintendent thought it might be a really good time to put in an application for those things because a lot of districts probably just didn't have people who could manage it because they were in the middle of a transition. So, I think the building aid would be like 30% of a project. So it's not, we haven't decided as a board whether or not to move forward. We did take a vote that we would support the continued exploration of this to see if the state would grant us that. Because if that comes through, wouldn't you rather us make improvements for 30% less than what they would cost in the long run? So that's sort of where we're at. That's what my understanding is. Please help me if I'm misspeaking.
No, you're-
Right,
By the
right.
way, our meeting minutes from last month's meeting reflects a lot of discussion on that topic.
Okay, sorry then.
No,
You-
no,
you
it's,
know
no,
about
it's
that,
great
yeah.
to,
I
it's great to hear it again. and-
Only skimmed those minutes, sorry about that.
Are these big projects that, such that they would be bonded, or are we looking at putting them into?
No, they're bonds.
Smaller
They
ones
would
that
be
would be in
bonds.
in the budget?
Yeah.
They're
definitely
Big bond
Bond
projects.
projects, yes.
I mean,
Yes.
but we could break it into smaller projects, but not small enough to not bond it.
Yes,
Right.
I would
gotcha.
say.
Right.
The
That's
order of magnitude.
what I know about that.
Yeah.
And then, we just had some updates on where we're going for the same update you had regarding the budget. And then, as Kelly mentioned, we had a TA yesterday for, the support staff, and we'll have those details public after the board and the support staff ratifies that, but that will change the warrant that we were anticipating, because we really are struggling across the district to fill positions, and these are not unneeded positions. We're really struggling with food service workers, which if we don't have food service workers, we can't open the school. We're struggling with custodial positions. Those two areas have been hugely hard for us to fill, and so we needed to make some changes right away in what we needed to do. So we have a sidebar agreement for this particular year that's using ESSER funds, and then, so that will not be something that is in the budget, if you will. It's using monies that we can use for that, and then we have a new TA. So all of that, you will have that information next month.
Great, and we're not considering anything on the professional staff side.
No,
Sidebar.
not right now, but be prepared. So, but yes, contract negotiations for the professional staff will start, the process would begin in July of 2023.
Right, okay. Can you also mention your new, there was just, because of the resignation of one of your members, you do have a new board member?
We do. He started with us in, I think it's been
2
2 months. Tom Enright is our, we appointed Tom Enright as the replacement for Liz, who is now working for the Commissioner of Education. So Tom has started, and he's up and running, and has been very involved in our recent conversations with support staff, because he
Yes.
has a significant amount of experience in negotiating those things. And for the viewing public, because I know so many people are watching this, when we appointed Tom, he did, in answering his questions in interview, he did say that he would not be running in March. So this is him just finishing out the term. And we're happy to have someone with so much experience. That's it. Is there anything else? I
We
don't
can
know.
talk him into it, can't we?
I wish
So,
I could.
I think that's it. I do have a few, I mean, while we focus on, I'm making a list as I sit here. As we focus on the budget in these last months, there is a lot of information that comes in, particularly in November. We'll know where rates were set for this year. We'll get an enrollment view. We'll get adequacy aid information, and adequacy contributes to the tax calculation. There is a new legislative session underway, so there are probably many LSRs that are kind of on the list and working and wending their way through the budgetary process. And I've always promised that DOE report update, but I don't think we'll get to that in November. Oh, and we did talk about having Lauren come, Geller, to talk about student services. So we'll have a non-public session to review some items about student services.
Lauren,
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Where's Geller come from? DeGenero, sorry.
Well, that's the only point I would love to make from the special ed perspective, is that when we talked earlier, there's a lot of programming that happens within the district.
Yes.
So, I mean, I know that you guys all know this, but I feel like as a school board person, I should make sure that the public, if they are paying attention, like, when we talk about out-of-district placement, we work really hard. I mean, the district and Lauren and her team and Amy, who is no longer with us, sadly, worked super hard on making sure that we could provide for kids in district. But that has also had great impact on our spaces. And that's one of the reasons why folks don't really understand that our high school is used to its max, even though we may have enrollment differences, not that much, let's say, or less students. We are using spaces in the high school for our special ed students, which saves us, which is the right thing to do for our kids, and it helps with the budget.
Yes. So she will be joining us. We do that as a non-public session, really not in any way to not be transparent about those programs that we offer, but it is just a way to, we don't anticipating, at all getting into details about any specific cases. It is just, we don't want any questions or information to go kind of awry, because it does deal with some sensitive information. So.
Absolutely.
Okay. I do need to talk about the date for our November meeting, because we're not going to be here on Thanksgiving.
No way.
So,
Yeah, no.
I know that you're disappointed.
Where's that dedication?
So we can do the Thursday before, which is the 17th. I think your board meets, Polly, on the 16th, right?
I believe we
Usually
do.
you're the third Wednesday.
I think this year we are still the third Wednesday. I have to check.
We could do Monday, the 21st. We could do after, like Monday, the 28th. I'm inclined to lean toward the 17th, which is the week before Thanksgiving.
From my perspective, the 21st is fine.
And the more time I have, the better.
Monday, the
I
21st.
can't be here for the 17th.
Okay.
They all have conflicts for me, but, so there's nothing that's necessarily better than the
So
other.
you would rather have the 28th?
21st
Yeah,
does work for
21st
me,
to
but
28th would be my preference.
Yeah.
28th for sure, because that gives me more
Then,
time.
Let's go
then
for
the
the 28th.
21st, well,
Good
the
meeting.
21st would be a lot better. The 28th, we're probably doing some town budgeting that day, would be my guess.
We're
Yeah,
definitely on
we'd
the
almost
16th.
certainly be doing town budgeting that day.
So
Okay.
21st,
So
okay with
21st.
you?
Yeah, I can make that work for sure.
Will the
Okay.
data that we expect to have by then be available by then?
Well, if that's the date you pick, it will.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll go with Monday, the 21st. Okay.
Same baptism.
Does anyone else have any last questions or issues or items they'd like to bring up, or topics for further discussion? Brian, we'll take your readout.
We are pretty much right on the nose here. I mean, we're like 12 minutes early, so this is a pretty exact scheduling here. Awesome. And stayed right on budget. I mean, stayed right on task. On task.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone. At this point, I'll take a motion to adjourn at 8:13
So moved.
from Brian, seconded by Tony. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous, 600. Thank you.